Welcome, 1918 to the year 2008. Or should we be welcoming 2008 to the year 1918? Either way, this is episode 424 of an Unearthly podcast, streaming live on the 12th of October 2021, and featuring Torchwood To the Last Man, written by Helen Raynor, and starring John Barrowman as Captain Jack Harkness, Eve Miles as Gwen Cooper, Bern Gorman as Owen Harper, Naoko Mori as Toshiko Sato, and Gareth David-Lloyd as Yanto Jones. I am Bill Sylvia, the writer in black, and we finally have some news. With me are Randy Ronson McCulloch
Actually, we kind of had news last week, but we've got more news.
and Thomas Fireheart.
Oh my god, they remembered Tosh as a character.
Mad Matt Winchell will not be with us tonight due to doing some extra time at work and being unavailable to stream, but he did leave us with some thoughts about the episode.
He did?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I
They'll
thought
probably
he
be a little buried at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was going to get to us after the fact, but
Yeah, he managed to squeeze watching the episode in before his shift started.
okay. So, how's the week been for you two?
Too bad. I mean, it's annoyingly hot today. I think when I checked what the difference between Celsius and Fahrenheit is, it would apparently be about 91 and a bit Fahrenheit here
Yeah.
right now.
So I
So I've
can't
got my
complain.
aircon on.
I can't complain too much about it being 80 all week.
I hate both of you. It's
Oh,
50s and 60s here.
I would much prefer that, especially
Yeah,
since
same.
I think the apartment below mine keeps the heat on at night.
Oh,
Be,
God. I hate that.
because my living room is air conditioned and nice and cool, but when I'm in my bedroom like I am right now, it feels like the AC is not even on, even though I have all the right doors open to funnel the AC right to me.
Yeah, I lived at a place that had oil heating, oil pipes that provided radiant heating throughout the apartment. We lived on the middle floor, so we had pipes above us and pipes below us.
Mhm.
And dead of winter, frickin' 20 degrees below zero outside, and we had to have the windows open because it was roasting in the
Mhm.
apartment.
I think last winter I spent a lot of time with the AC on, and this winter will probably be very similar.
Wow.
Mm. I mean, by contrast, I'm just worried about how hot this summer here in Australia is going to be because we actually had a proper winter where I live. So I'm like, well, if it's anything like last year, we actually had a proper winter then too, in that it was actually cold most of the time. There was like maybe one day where it was hot, but otherwise it was actually a proper winter. So it's like, well, summer's going to suck. uh,
I had a little fun earlier this week. I had to make my trip to the cardiologist. Um, and I got to the hospital and drove all the way up to the roof on the fifth floor because half of the parking structure was under construction. Um, and after that epic trek, I get down there and discover that not only was half the parking structure under construction, the main doors to the clinic were under construction, so I had to go in through the hospital doors, which are on the exact opposite side of the building from
oh,
the heart failure clinic.
oh,
Um, and this is not a small building.
mm,
Fortunately, as I'm sitting there trying to catch my breath after getting through the parking garage, they basically, a guy came up to me and offered me a lift in one of the bariatric wheelchairs. So
oh.
that part of it wasn't that bad. They called me up there, did the appointment, and then they called for somebody to go bring me back down to the parking structure. And I waited. And I waited. And I waited. and I began to discover it's a bad idea to take my diuretic pills prior to going to a doctor's appointment. As it suddenly I could feel it beginning to percolate, and I still had to wait. By the time they finally got me, took me back down to the parking lot, discovered they could not fit these wheelchairs in through the parking lot doors, so I still had to get up and walk across the parking lot again and get back to my house. Oh yeah, that was bad.
That seems like a design flaw.
Yes, it is a
Yeah.
design flaw. I think wheelchairs have gotten wider in the past 20 years.
Mm.
In any case, today I had to go to cardiotherapy, which was less of an event. Except, of course, the fact that in both buildings you have to wear a mask. And walking anywhere with a mask on means eventually I'm going to start breathing heavy, and then I have to sit down, and it takes me about 20 minutes before my breathing will go back to normal because of the bloody mask.
Hi, Wolfen Forest in the chat.
I got halfway to the appointment, and my cardiotherapist comes out. It's like, oh, we have an idea. Let's save us some time and stuff. We'll hook you up to the monitor here. We'll take your resting blood pressure here, and then we'll walk you back there and take that as exercise. And I'm like, oh, thank you, thank you. So we do that. I have to stop about halfway because I lose control of my breathing, but that's only a few seconds, and then we get in there. I get into the room. They take the rest of my stuff. I fill out a bunch of forms. They take my weight, which 2 different scales, 2 different places, 2 different days. 30 pounds different in my weight.
Oh.
I liked yesterday's measure before today, but
Was one of them with shoes and one? I mean, I know your shoes aren't 30 pounds. I wouldn't insinuate that.
one of them was in shoes, one of them was in Crocs, so I don't think it makes that much of a difference.
Not unless they were steel-toed boots or something.
Nope. Really, Converse versus Crocs, not that big of a weight difference.
Maybe, I imagine 5 pounds would be highballing that.
Yeah, and it would be highballing it. And other than that, I was. My clothes were comparable. I think one I was in shorts and a t-shirt, and the other one I was in sweatpants and a t-shirt. So again, not much difference there. And it just, it's just one particular model of scale, for whatever reason, cannot weigh me right. And that was the one that cardiology had. And it's weighed me like damn near 650 pounds once, and then I'll get on the scale again 5 minutes later. It weighs me It weighs me like 550. It's just that scales are all over the place. So I trust this one today, but I'm not happy with it because I was just a scooch over 600, which means I'm still in oh hell no, rather than damn, which is where I was hoping to be. But we'll see how that goes. Anybody else have anything happen this week?
I mentioned just to you when we were just the 2 of us, but I did get contacted by my school. I had requested to work with somebody on cardio since they have physical training through the school gym back in August, but they were a bit short-staffed and had over requests. They contacted me this weekend about finally getting starting on that. So over the next couple weeks, I'll be having my first session with that to hopefully work on my lung capacity and resting heart rate. I hadn't set out with the goal of any weight loss, but apparently, so the last time I had weighed myself before this was 2019. I was 240. I knew I had gained weight both before the pandemic and after the pandemic, just based on pant sizes. But when I actually went to a doctor for the first time in a couple of years, I was 340. So I'm kind of thinking it would be nice to get back to my pre-pandemic weight, not for any, any specific ideas of, what what's an ideal weight and all of that, because so much of that is nonsense.
Mm.
But I do like the idea of not throwing away all the clothes that I did come to Ohio with and being able to fit back into some of them that are a bit too tight right now. So I'm hoping I just
Mm.
lose a couple of inches.
Yeah.
But the more important part is being able to get from campus to home uh, at night when the bus isn't running without stopping to catch my breath 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, I think we
Mm.
all have hobbited a bit over the pandemic and put on some weight.
I mean, the only
Pissed
reason
off that
I've
the last 2 shirts I bought, they were both the size I've been wearing, but they're both too tight around the gut. And I have
uh,
another shirt on the way. I'm going to be pissed off if that's the same thing, because I, I mean,
mm,
I guess I could wear it, but it looks like it's in that situation, it kind of looks like a sausage casing, and I'd rather not when
mm,
I'm giving a lecture.
mm. I mean, I know the only reason I've lost weight this year at all is just that I realized, oh, that's the issue. I've been the portion sizes I've been having have been too big, so I'm just like, okay, because I'm like, I would think with the job I have and how active it keeps me, and that I've got 4 shifts a week now, I was like, why am I putting on instead of taking off? And then I realized, oh, it's because I'm eating more than I'm burning off. So I
Whereas I,
started to down my portion sizes.
Whereas I went from a restaurant shift where I was on my feet 40 hours a week to working from a chair and in my apartment without needing to move from room to room unless I needed to refill my coffee.
Yeah,
Mm,
that was one of the points I really put on weight is when I went from school where I was dashing from class to class to going to work sitting in a chair and not getting up other than to go to the bathroom until 8 hours later.
mm,
Um, Mind you, I've always been chunky, but I that's when I seriously put on some tonnage.
I'm trying to get
mm,
back into the mindset where even like, because sometimes it's easy to get in that all or nothing mindset, but I'm reminding
yeah.
myself that even if I take a bus somewhere and then I just walk around for a little bit, and just do a few thousand steps, it's still better for my cardio than if I just stay home and I only walk 500 steps that day.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I've the few times I've gone on trips over the past few years, I made sure to like the venue for the wrestling stuff I was going to, I would try to make sure was in like not too far walking distance, but long enough that it was still like a decent walk, like a half-hour walk or something, so that I could take like a bus most of the way there when I'm on my way there because it's during the day and like in Australia, I do not want to be walking out in the sun. Also, I'm ginger, so I don't want to burn to a crisp.
Hmm.
Um, and then like it's still like when I get off the bus, it's still like a 5-10 minute walk to the venue anyway. So I still get a bit of a walk, and then just walk back to the hotel. So it's like a half-hour walk after the show. So and then it's at like you know 11 p.m. or something. So it's at least not as bad temperature wise.
Anyway,
Uh,
moving on to tonight's show, we have birthdays, a couple. We have news. Yes, there's news. We have some geek talk, and then we've got our episode summary, our review, our final thoughts, and our ratings. Who's up for the summary tonight?
I am.
so
Okay.
And I'm putting my final touches on the notes right now. So if we talk long enough, I'll have a fully scripted summary.
All right. So moving on to birthdays. The first birthday we have is one of our guest birthdays, but one of our favorite guest birthdays. It is, in fact, King Yakarnos from 1986 season. It is Brian Blessed. Yes, indeed. Our Brian. Actually, excuse me. Let me rephrase that. Brian Blessed. Thank you. Um, he turned 85 today, or on the 9th, actually, 3 days ago.
mm,
So he's getting up there, but we still love him.
mm,
The second birthday is a companion birthday. It is Nicola Bryant, who played Perry back in the Colin Baker series, season 94. or excuse me, 84 through 86, and she turned 61. So happy birthday, Brian, and happy birthday, Nicola. Moving on to the news. We have a date of launch. When the first episode of Series 13 is coming out, it is coming out on Halloween. That is October 31st, 2021.
I wish we had done a betting pool.
We should have.
It was definitely not November 9th or later.
Mm.
Yeah, they were really cutting that one to the wire. Usually they let us know earlier than this, but
Hibnall was like, do I really need to let them know this far in advance? We can tell them the week before, right?
I mean, I feel like that's happened with Chibnall generally. Like, I think even like series 11 and 12, like we didn't know until like either a couple weeks out, or I think in like series 11 it might have been we knew like a month out,
a month
or
out is
maybe like
usually
3 weeks or something.
a month out is usually when we get the date. Cuz
I remember
that gives them 30 to 31 days to just hype the frack out of it.
I remember the last GeekCon panel we did was so frustrating because Chibnall would not let any news loose. So we were like, what to predict in the next series of Doctor Who? Well, we have nothing confirmed. Not a damn thing.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be happy to see Russell T for this because he will let things slip, but he will do it very sneakily.
Just gotta hope that he doesn't let BBC let major things slip, which is really the one thing I liked about Chibnall not letting much, if anything, slip, was let stuff that it was like, why the hell did you reveal that now? Like the return of John Sim.
Well, yeah,
That was the BBC
series.
marketing team.
that was Moffat getting pissed at the BBC marketing team too, because he wanted that a surprise.
But I liked during the Moffat era the fact that by now we would have known the first 6 episode titles and who had directed those episodes, and there would still be some mysteries later on in the season. And we would be able to be like, okay, what does this title mean? We have like 3 details about it. What can we figure out?
Yeah, and we don't have. Well, we actually do. So since this is a segue, I will bring in the next article, and that is the fact that there was a 20-second teaser released. Actually, that's the wrong article. That's my bad. That was my bad. That was me scripting in a hurry. Do they even mention it? No, they don't. So there was a 20-second teaser that occurred. It's basically an extended version of the teaser that was just like 2 seconds, but it gives us more information. And it gives us the name of the ongoing 6 episodes that we're going to get, and that is Doctor Who Flux. They mentioned several enemies during this trailer, or this teaser, including the Weeping Angels. I think were the Sontarans mentioned?
Yes, Sontarans and Weeping Angels were the 2 returning monsters in the teaser.
And then I think wasn't there like the Marauders or
the Ravages?
The
Ravagers,
which some people are saying that as Ravagers with an R, but I'm not. It depends if the subtitles on YouTube were generated by BBC or by algorithm, because it's hard to tell with her accent.
Yes, it is. The thing is that
I mainly remember that people was like, oh, well, there are things called the Ravages in Big Finish. Is it going to be that? And it's like, it's like, it's a generic enough name that I could see it not be, but also, I mean, there's no reason not to.
So we get this. We see a little bit of the new companion. I think he has one line of dialogue, which is, "Doctor, we need you."
Well, it tells us so much.
Oh yeah, it does. It tells us everything, doesn't it?
It was. Did you guys see how BBC unrolled this teaser?
I did not.
So what they basically did was, I mean, it was on YouTube, so that stayed there.
Mm.
But they tweeted out the teaser, and then like 20 minutes later, they deactivated their Twitter account for like 12 or
Oh yeah,
24 hours.
I did hear about
and
that.
their YouTube.
So
Yeah.
everyone who had retweeted that was like, "Well, I don't have that teaser anymore. I can't show it to you, but we saw it."
Yeah. Like,
And
yeah,
I know there was
all
speculation as to whether it was on purpose or whether like someone had screwed up at the BBC and like their
Yeah.
servers went down, which would not cause the Twitter account to go down, by the way. So
No, it would just lose
Yeah.
access to the videos.
right,
yeah.
and YouTube
Like,
was
yeah.
still their YouTube account was still up.
Yeah, but was empty. Or at least appeared to be empty. Was
Yeah,
the
they
thing.
privated all their videos.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting,
Um,
because the Twitter account was deactivated during the time when I shared the teaser in our group chat.
Mm. I know I saw they were advertising it like they were doing little bits of tease apparently around in public in the UK, because like I forget if I shared it or not, but there was like a little
Yeah, I think we covered that last, or did we? No, I think you might have just shared an Instagram post or a tweet showing it, and then
Yeah.
I kind of forgot about it because that was
Mm.
like the same day as the teaser.
It was like, yeah, they were showing little bits around here and there and in cities and that, so it was like, oh, okay. Yeah, of course it's funny because it makes you wonder how long
for the hype machine. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you wonder when, if at all, they're gonna drop a full trailer.
If they're gonna drop a full
October
trailer.
30th.
Yeah.
Yeah, the day before. You're not giving us a lot to go on here, Chibnall. Either that or the BBC has no faith in this season. I mean, either or.
I think at this point we can say that the returning monster they were hyped about, that the actors were hyped about, is either the Weeping Angels or the Centaurans.
Or both.
I can't say that either of those are monsters that I'm particularly hyped to see come back.
I am not hyped at all about the Weeping Angels. Although I will state it will be interesting to see what's done with them from somebody other than Stephen Moffat.
There are several hours of rants on our YouTube channel explaining why we are not hyped about the Weeping Angels, so we will not go into great detail about that tonight.
Yes. Go into our archives and see if you can pull out my rant on Angels Take Manhattan. That was about 4 hours long.
Of course, that was back when we recorded with Audacity and not the best software.
No, that was back when we recorded with Fraps.
It was already Fraps at that point? Okay.
I think so. It wasn't long after that Matt switched to actually streaming us, so... Which works so much better, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've seen... and like it came up, like I realized I don't think we talked about it last week, but something that came up in a video I watched and I linked to Bill privately. A guy was like, wow, you've just kind of shot Series 13 in the foot by announcing the RTD news now and not after, because suddenly everyone's not going to give a shit about Series 13 because they'll be too interested about what's coming after.
No. It's a double-edged sword there, because if they didn't, like, everybody was like, oh, Doctor Who's going to be canceled after Series 13. It's going on hiatus for another 5 years. Like, all of the rumor mills were just, like, jerking out clickbait after clickbait.
Yeah, and the big thing now that RTD is chosen is who's going to be the Doctor after Whittaker. And that's all up, and you had to get the showrunner first before they could make that decision.
And I can guarantee that's not going to be announced before New Year's.
Yeah.
Unless it leaks somehow. But I imagine RTD and Chibnall would both be looking to fire somebody if the next Doctor is leaked before New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it before, I would rather just find out when the regeneration happens at this point, but if we're going to find out at all, I would rather, like, we've at least had 2 of the 3 Jodie specials post Series 13 before we find out.
Yeah, I would like it to be revealed like right after the Easter special.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So that's really all we can really glean from this teaser. Is that the Flux is the name of the six-parter. It is also an in-universe event that is happening,
Mm.
and that it's going to bring the Doctor a frack ton of enemies.
Do you think the titles are just going to be Flux Part 1, Flux Part 2?
Uh,
And I would
I guess
love
it'll
it.
depend.
I would love it to death if it was.
Yeah.
Because that would just be a harken back to classic Who.
Mm. And would make this technically the only serial or like by virtue of naming convention, it would make it the only
Except
serial.
The End of
in
Time would be the only one, I think.
universe.
And Spyfall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've done part 1, part 2 before, but this
Or I
will be
guess
the...
at least, yeah, I guess like
There
more
hasn't
than
been a part
more than a
3
2.
since the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If nothing else, I would expect it to be something like Key to Time, maybe, where it's like serialized in that they all run into each other, but otherwise like connected events, but sort of telling connected but different stories in each episode, sort of a thing.
We're gonna have to wait and see, because I don't know. The way they've been hearkening this, it sounds like it's going to be one continuous storyline. And if that's the case, that's going to be really hard for us to rate.
So I
Yeah.
like, and I still take that with a grain of salt, especially now that they've mentioned 3 distinct monsters, because to me that says it's going to be episodic with a serialized plot running through it, just like even if you look at something like The Flash, there's a monster of the week, but there's a season plot. And yes, you can say that it's one story for 20 episodes, but it's really individual episodes. And I think that's really what this is going to be like.
We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, we definitely have to wait and see, but I do not think it's going to be in the style of a 6-part serial, personally.
We'll have to see.
No matter what they say.
Yeah.
I would love it if it was, but at the same time, it's going to be a bitch to rate. If it's individual stories, we'll have to see. But
it'll be our dry run of Children of Earth.
Oh Jesus! Or God help us, Miracle Day. I am not looking forward to that. All right, I think that's it for news. That takes us into Geek Talk. And was that you,
No
Bill?
Big Finish.
There was no Big Finish.
Yep.
There's like news of stuff that's in pre-release, but nothing officially released.
I did see in my emails that there's new Charlotte Pollard with the 8th Doctor, but they haven't released plot summaries yet, so I don't even know if it's post the stories that we've already covered or if it's in between.
I think it's supposed to be new stories, but the details aren't coming out, and the release is not until 2022. So that I didn't cover it because it's not due out until 2022. Anyway, so like I said, we're on to Geek Talk, and the first thing, somebody wanted to bring up What If.
I realized that I left it without a color because I wasn't sure if I was the only one who'd be able to talk about it or not.
I've seen it all.
So yeah, like it's kind of interesting because I actually fell behind on it a bit, but just because I was preoccupied with other stuff. But thankfully the episodes being so short, I'm pretty sure like the 3 or 4 episodes I hadn't seen, I just like binged in one sitting. But yeah, like it's an interesting concept. It's funny because I kind of almost wish some of the episodes were longer than others, because there are some where it's like, yeah, that justifies only really being a half hour. And some are like, God, I kind of wish this was like 45 minutes, maybe an hour, but you know. That being said, some of these could easily be followed up in a season 2 or something, which
I
I pretty much
I'm
would
do
expect to happen.
I do hope there is a season 2. The first season was
Hmm.
interesting. And I agree, there
Yeah.
were some episodes that were just like, you're not really supposed to take them seriously. And then
Hmm.
there's some episodes which are very, very plausible.
Hmm.
I mean, the
Um.
what if Thor was an only child was not meant to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And then, but the one, what if the Avengers were killed before they became the Avengers, that
Hmm.
was actually fairly serious.
I saw all the
Yeah.
memes after that one of I think it was they claimed that episode confirmed who the most useless Avenger was.
uh.
It
Yeah. It's been a while since I watched that. Uh.
it was. I mean, it's like I'm like watching a few of these, and I'm like, some of these are really contrived. And I think I
Hmm.
mentioned this when I gave this a first look a while back. It's like the first one was what if Peggy Carter was received the super soldier serum, and there's at one point they just give her the shield, but there's no
Hmm.
reasoning behind them giving her the shield, so it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Was
Yeah.
the Marvel Zombies one remotely plausible?
Um.
The cause of it was a bit contrived.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Funny enough, I don't think I've saw people talking about that one on Twitter at all.
Hmm. I mean, it was one that that I remember seeing a lot of people hyped for, but personally, I don't really give that much of a shit about zombie stuff. So it
Um,
was like interesting, but it was like, can take it or leave it.
yeah, the whole concept was that they brought the zombie virus back from the subquantum realm from Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, that's kind of a stretch.
Hmm.
Mm.
And I mean, you find that out in the
Um,
first like 5 6 minutes, so that's not even really a spoiler.
Hmm.
Um, so that one, I'm like, okay, that was also a bit of a stretch, but the rest of it was dealable.
mm,
The finale I thought was actually pretty good.
yeah, and it actually sort of brings everything back in a way. Like, there's nods to pretty much every episode so far.
Mm-hmm.
Which is nice. It's also interesting. I read up that apparently there was going to actually be a spin-off to this based around um T'Challa Star-Lord,
Mm.
and because because we've lost Chadwick Boseman, that's kind of up in the air now whether they want to do it or not.
Yeah, well, they've
Um,
recast everyone else that's left, so it
yeah.
wouldn't surprise me if they
Um,
recast him for
hmm.
animation only.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely a thing. Like, if they were ever gonna do it in live action, then that's squashed.
Speaking of
But
which, there were so many clickbaity headlines about how Tom Holland has been replaced as Spider-Man because they used a different actor for the animated show than him.
And that's due to the licensing between Sony and Marvel, I'm pretty sure.
hmm. I mean, either that or did they just couldn't get him for it.
Either that or they didn't trust him not to leak the plot before it aired.
Maybe.
They no, that doesn't make
Um,
sense because they got what's his face to play Banner, didn't they?
yeah, Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's notorious for it.
Hmm.
Um, they used to actually have to have the other cast members always there and about ready to step on his foot whenever he's going to open his mouth.
uh, um. Yeah, I'd say I definitely like even ones like some are definitely better than others. I feel like I really like the finale the most just because it like actually makes everything feel interconnected even though pretty much everything was standalone. I will say my one thing that bugged me about the finale, though, um, without really going into God, it's hard to word it in a way that doesn't spoil anything, but I guess let's just say the logic of how certain things work, as far as I'm aware, in the comics, has basically been thrown out the window so we can make this final fight work.
Maybe to
Because
an
technically
extent.
it shouldn't work. But
And
Wouldn't
yeah.
be the first time.
and you can bring that up with me after the podcast, and I'll give you my
Mm-hmm.
interpretation real quick.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say? Because we're coming up on 6 minutes here.
Um, it's just it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see which versions of these characters do make it to live action. But otherwise, I'm definitely interested in whatever they do in a season 2 and moving forward generally.
Yep, I quite agree with you. It was an interesting run, and I hope to see more. Okay, so that's our bit. And next up, you were talking about the Clone Wars, Bill?
Yes, I was able to finish up my watch through of the Clone Wars season 7 last week, which is basically three serialized stories. One in which Ahsoka moves on from the Jedi and takes her next mission. One in which the Bad Batch, which would later be announced as stars of the next Star Wars show, were kind of introduced. And then a conclusion arc that runs in parallel with Revenge of the Sith, showing what Ahsoka, Rex, and Maul were doing during that movie. The first two arcs were pretty standard fare for the show, with the last one being clearly a special event with its own unique titles and basically treated as a four-part movie. Throughout the first three episodes, they referenced other events that were happening at the same time. I could see why some people might not like that and might find it overly derivative. But for me, it actually made it more believable to see how this event fit into the overall narrative of the end of the war. And it would have had more weight, of course, if this had aired before. The main characters, the three I just mentioned, all appeared in Rebels, but of course, there's nothing to be done about that. The show was
Hmm.
canceled before Rebels started, and then they only brought it back after the fact.
Really, I mean, the big deal was setting up the Bad Batch for the Bad Batch series.
Right, and that's
Hmm.
probably how they got it greenlit.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea of showing parallel events that would never have been seen on screen during the timeline of Revenge of the Sith,
Mhm.
just because I'm otherwise like, well, Ahsoka must have died during that because
Mhm.
when the Clone Wars first came up, I'm like, wait, he's got an apprentice. Well, she's going to be dead by the end of the show
Yeah, that was the
because
big thing in 2008 was like, oh, he has an apprentice. So we can assume she dies before the end of the war. So here we see
hmm,
why we didn't see her at the end of the war and how she
yeah,
survived for to appear in Rebels.
which I do wonder if like their intention was to kill her off originally, but she like people latched onto her so quickly that they were just like, well, fuck, I guess we should probably try and not kill her off then.
I actually do think that might be the case. I figured that the end of the Clone Wars thing was actually going to be planned on her death, but she was such a fan favorite that they're like,
Hmm.
oh crap, what are we going to do? We'll just leave it ambiguous and move on to Rebels. Hey, we included her in Rebels, so she must have lived.
Which is also
Hmm.
interesting because based on how little she appears in season 2, I think at that point they were like, yeah, everybody hates the character. But then when they actually started to give her some development, everyone started to like her.
Hmm. Yeah,
And of
that
course, the
wouldn't
people that
surprise
grew
me.
up, the people that had, the kids that were growing up watching the show got older and more vocal as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it
Especially
wouldn't
now
surprise.
that this came out 12 years after the first the pilot. So,
Yeah, like it would not surprise me if like the way she was written or whatever irked people at first, and then they just actually made like
mhm.
whatever changes they made or feedback they actually took on or whatever like improved the character to the point that she caught on. Um, but yeah, that's Like, it's funny. Like, I've only ever seen bits and pieces of the Clone Wars.
I
I'll
tried
probably try and get through it at some point.
I tried watching them in war chronological order once. That got really confusing.
I mean, the main standout thing I remember being hilariously amazing was like R2D2 gets into a fight with another like R2 type droid, and they like put epic music behind it, even though it's just two fucking astromech droids fighting. And it's like, okay, this is like amazing, but also really stupid.
Shoot,
I
but
love
if
it.
you, I mean, if you look at the Clone Wars and the sequel trilogy, R2 has probably caught more bodies than Luke.
Probably.
And that was the thing about the Clone Wars. Some of the episodes were really good. Some of the episodes were
Although
really stupid.
I, I'd say
Mm.
that most of those bodies were droids, and Luke has also killed. And he's killed some droids, but
Yeah.
R2's killed a lot of droids.
Yeah.
Uh Yeah, I think they've both killed a bunch of droids, so
Mm.
it'd be hard to stack them up. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Not about that.
All right. Well, we were coming up on 5 minutes anyway.
Okay.
So, the next thing on the list was you saw a movie that we warned you probably didn't want to.
Yeah, so Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, is the final Superman movie starring Christopher Reeve. I was very skeptical when I saw the nuclear, or with, especially I kind of knew about this going into it, about the nuclear disarmament plot, because the plot about, and especially when I saw it being executed, because the plot about Superman basically deciding to become the god of Earth seems both antithetical to his character and like it would not be received well by those world leaders that you see cheering for it that need to go home and justify their military expenditure. I did like how this plot ended up becoming a tool for Lex Luthor, although I thought they could have done a little bit more with that. And the way Superman came around at the end about this needing to be something the people need to decide rather than just him, even if the movie hit us over the head with it with a mallet. I didn't realize the journalistic integrity plot had already been done before. I had seen it done in Supergirl better, but I didn't realize it had also been done here. So the resolution here makes it seem like they didn't really know what to do with this plot, other than introducing a third love interest for Clark Kent, and it didn't really tie into the main plot as well as it could have. Speaking of Clark Kent and his love interests, at a certain point, he becomes just as bad as Gwen Cooper if he's just going to keep erasing Lois's memory every time he wants to have a conversation with her. It occurs to me that this movie also might be the first time Superman and Lex had a baby together, which is a plot point that would recur throughout the years. Overall, the movie's better than I expected from the way people talk about it, but it's still easily the weakest movie of the Reeve era except for Supergirl.
Well, this was the movie that killed the Reeve era.
Mm.
Um, because apparently he hated doing it.
Which is interesting because I heard that the plot was his idea.
It partially was. He basically got to help write the plot, and then watched as the directors destroyed it.
Gotcha. I imagine he did not write the line, I am dad now. Which makes me wonder if the similar line in Deltarune was supposed to be a Superman 4 reference.
It might have been. But yeah, it was. Reeve contributed to the basic storyline, and then the directors went through and rewrote everything.
Mm.
And because of budget reasons, for starters.
I imagine Christopher Reeve was not the one who was like, oh, we need a new non-Lois sexy love interest for Clark.
Well, did they even get Margot Kidder back for this? Because I thought she was done.
I mean, they definitely had Lois Lane. They didn't have like his Lana mysteriously disappeared between movies. I don't know which one was Margot Kidder.
Margot Kidder was the actress that played Lois in Superman 1 and 2.
So let's see. I thought it was the same actress, but maybe she just did a good job. Let's see. And yep, she was in it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Because the reason they went to Lana in Superman 3 was Margot Kidder was out. I didn't know they had paid her to get back in.
Yeah.
Because I know in Superman 3, she had she appeared she cameoed at the start and end of the movie. In
Might
the
just
main
be that that's
plot.
all she was willing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this one, she's almost more like Clark. She's almost more like Clark's wingman. She's basically just there to be like, that she like I forget the name of the new love interest because she's just not very memorable. But Lois tells him to make sure to compliment her dress because she really wants him to notice her dress and things like that. Which is funny because Lois is still clearly in love with Superman, at least when, she knows that they're the same person. So again, something else they could have done something more interested in that they didn't really seem interested in doing. They could have made more interesting. That came out in jumbled out of my mouth the first time.
Yeah. I don't know why, but for some reason, I have a memory that might be bullshit of reading somewhere that like Brainiac was supposed to be involved in that movie. Which, if it was changed, that I could see that being a budget
Mm.
thing, because like
He
Brainiac
doesn't
you could
really
pull off
seem to fit
now.
into this plot at all.
I
Yeah.
think I think he might have been in one of the earlier scripts, and then they kept rechanging it and rechanging it.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
think
I'm a little
That would
surprised
make
Brainiac
sense.
was never in one of these movies
actually
because
I
he's
think he was planned for Superman 3. Now that I think about it.
Might have been.
And it was, by the way, the nuclear disarmament plot was Reeves. That was what he contributed.
Mm.
But they kind of then proceeded to mess it up and then kind of crap all over it. And
Which to that end, I could see him not necessarily wanting the like Superman playing God aspect there. That was probably a director thing.
But
well, it was like that part actually works because it's an arc where he's like, okay, I need everyone's telling, or at least the Kryptonian elders are telling me I should not do this, and then I do this, and it causes a bigger problem, and then I come back at the end like, okay, I'm not going to do this. Y'all need to do this. So I thought like that was a decent arc.
all right. So, any final thoughts on this movie?
Like I said, weakest movie of the Reeve era except for Supergirl, but not quite as bad as I expected.
All right. So that does it for Geek Talk. Have you had enough time to put your summary together?
Yes. I'm kind of wishing I'd went to the bathroom while you were talking about what if because I just talked. This is now going to be me talking 3 times in a row, but I do have the summary.
All right. Let me pop the stopwatch up. Actually, I had it up from monitoring the Geek Talk, so let me reset it. And you ready?
Yep.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
As everyone arrives to Torchwood for work, Tosh is in a nice dress. Is this a Tosh Light episode where she's leaving to go on a date? Actually, no. It's a Tosh-centric episode where she's leaving to go on a date. Torchwood has kept a World War I soldier named Tommy in cryo since 1918, and Tommy gets thawed out once a year, except apparently for season 1, to run for a bit and make sure his battery still has juice. Tommy is supposed to be instrumental in solving a rift incident where 1918 and some unspecified future date crash up against one another like tectonic plates. Without an involvement, there will essentially be a massive timequake. In the meantime, Tosh takes Tommy out on a date to enjoy his time on Frozen. He just about convinces her to take him home for some special time when they get the call that the incident has begun and images from 1918 are appearing in the hospital Tommy was originally taken from, possibly because they are beginning to demolish said hospital. The instructions from 1918, which had been time sealed, now open, explaining that Tommy needs to take a rift key back to 1918 through the hospital the next morning. Tosh probes Jack for more information and finds out that after he goes back home, Tommy is hit by the PTSD he was hospitalized for and eventually is one of several hundred soldiers executed by a firing squad for so-called cowardice on the front lines. She agonizes over how to reconcile this with her role as Tommy's handler. Finally, she decides to spend the night with Tommy, and when he questions her, only tells him that he goes back to France and that his body is not lost, which is a small comfort to him. The next morning, Tommy begins to panic and lash out about being forced to sacrifice himself for the sake of the world. After convincing Jack to step out, Tosh talks Tommy through his crisis and he steps back in time. Back at HQ, they realize that the crisis hasn't ended. Because of Tommy reaching the past, he has lost his memories. They use magic, hand-wavy Torchwood technology to allow Tosh to astral project to 1918, where she talks Tommy into activating the key to close the rift. She emphasizes how brave he is, probably more for her own conscience than for him. He complies, sealing the rift, and Tosh is left wondering if sealing the rift was worth sending a good man to his death.
All right. I take it that's the end of your summary?
Yes.
All right, you did that in 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
Hmm.
You want to take a break and go to the bathroom now?
Sure. I bet you're going to say that I'm first to give my thoughts.
Nope. I'm going to do Matt's, and then I'll send it to Thomas. So you've got two people in front of you. All right. So, like Bill said, we did receive Matt's notices over Discord, and what he liked best overall is that everybody, even Owen, came off as good and interesting characters in this. Even bringing in a new main character for at least one story and giving a little more history to Torchwood. I agree with this, especially with Owen.
Yeah.
Owen, last episode Owen was still an asshole, but here, he honestly, I think, was the only one that would be able to relate to Tosh in this, falling for somebody that had to go away.
Yeah. It was definitely one of those ones where, like, oh hey, they actually realize that Owen is a shitty character. They're trying to slightly do a make it. I mean, it's also like too little, too late, but it is at least like, well, at least he went like 1 or 2 episodes without being a cunt, so that's nice.
Yep. How about
Owen
you?
was the thing you liked about the episode?
No, that was what Matt liked.
You read out Matt's?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I commented
Gotcha.
on that. Yes, it was. I agree with them, especially with the part of Owen. And we talked about that for a bit. So Thomas, how about you? What did you like about this episode overall? Because Matt stole mine. Goddammit.
I guess just generally, I guess I feel like I was gonna say just like Tosh in general, but I like the aspect of the relationship between Tommy and Tosh, because the fact that they make it clear that they have interacted several times before makes it more believable that they've become this close, rather than if this was like the first time they'd met.
Like if it had been Gwen instead of Tosh or something.
Yeah. I mean, if it had been Gwen, it would have even been even worse, because all the...
It would have been the first time they met. Oh, not counting Reese. Yeah.
Yeah, and Reese, yeah. It was just like, that would have made it even worse. But yeah, like with
I
with
forgot
Tosh,
about
like,
Reese because he's not even in this episode.
Yeah. I mean, Gwen does fucking try to be like, ooh, I want dibs, sort of a thing, which is like, god damn it. But yeah.
But she's
yeah,
like any more, what did she say, any more sexy Frozen voice or something?
Yeah. But yeah, like, it was just it was nice, and like I just generally like that it's not like the first interaction. It's very clear that this is a relationship that's been building up for, I mean, I forget exactly how long Tosh is supposed to have been with Torchwood at this point, but enough time anyway, and it's one of the few human interactions that Tommy has had
It's the
in
fourth
these
time
most
they've
recent
met, so
years. Yeah.
it's the fourth
Um
time they've met. So she's been with Torchwood at least 4 years.
yeah. Um so yeah, like I can, like it's a hell of a, yeah, like just again, it's like it's a hell of a lot more believable than if it was like the first time, which always fucking annoys me these days.
Yeah,
Uh,
the love at
Like a
first sight.
classic Who companion,
yeah.
like fucking Leela and Andred.
Yeah. Uh,
All right, so now it's down to me, and Matt stole mine, but I will again focus on the fact that this episode actually makes Owen a little bit redeemable. I
mm,
know why they did it and what they're setting up for later, but even so, the fact that he's concerned about Tosh as a person
mm,
enough to give her
Mhm.
this warning, look, I've been where you are, and it winds up hurting you every time. And he's the only one that could do that, and he's the only one that could console her afterwards.
Mm.
mm,
And it's kind of the only Nixon could go to China kind of thing.
mm,
Um, it was he had to have been there, and for once that experience is actually helping him deal with somebody else, and that was nice.
yeah.
All right, so
Did you intentionally go before me, or did you forget I hadn't gone?
oh, I'd forgotten you hadn't gone. I'm sorry, Bill.
Uh, so what I liked was, even though they never actually say the words PTSD and they never really spell out what the problem is, they actually address the history of so-called shell shock and PTSD, and
mm,
the way people were executed for mental illness during the war, and the problems with that, and the fact that people were accused of, even going so far as to, they mentioned Tommy was executed for cowardice, but she's emphasizing his brave and heroic sacrifice here. So even though they don't hit you over the head with it the way Superman 4 or Chris Chibnall would, they still really manage to cover, to give some information about that sort of issue and shed some light on it. So I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, well, I mean, shell shock is the old name for PTSD.
Yeah,
mm,
they didn't really start research. I think they started researching it because of World War One, and they gave it the name PTSD shortly thereafter.
No, it wasn't PTSD until the 80s. It went through several
Was it that
iterations.
late? Oh,
Yes,
so it had other names. Okay.
yeah, because it went from PTSD to combat fatigue to battle fatigue, and then there was something else, and
Ah,
then there was PTSD.
so it wasn't until they realized that rape victims and combat veterans were going through the same syndrome that they gave it the same name.
Yeah, for a long time, it was only thought that it was gotten by soldiers on the battlefield.
Hmm.
mm,
Um, and like I said, when this happened, they thought it was something that they could quickie cure and send out to the field. They didn't realize people could relapse.
mm,
They thought it was the shock of first battle, hence the name shell shock.
mm,
And so they were just like, nope, nope, okay. You're responding to people again. We'll send you right out there. And then they would freak out in battle, and yeah, well, now you're a coward, so ba-bang.
mm,
It was only, I think, at World War II did they realize this is an ongoing issue, and they began sending people to long care rehabilitation hospitals. And then, of course, people really started seeing it in Korea and Vietnam. And then, yeah, it became more and more as time went on that people in mental hospitals began seeing patients exhibiting the same signs that never had been in battle. And there's somebody finally the penny dropped, and they're like, "Wait a minute."
That's true, because yeah, in 1918, especially since so much of domestic violence and sexual violence was targeted at women, they were most likely to just be like, "Oh yeah, it's hysteria,"
Mm-hmm.
and that was all of the diagnosis that was needed at that time.
Yep. And remember, your only proper mental hospitals were still not really a thing. They were still using sanitariums most of the time.
Yeah.
Mm.
And interesting note, or somewhat interesting for anybody who's not already aware, hysteria basically means sickness of the uterus. And one of the
Oh
attempted
wow.
cures for it was the invention of the vibrator. Mental health has a long way to go, but it has come a long way.
Thank you for that fun
Mm.
fact, Bill. All right, shall we move on to what we liked least about this episode before YouTube decides to ban our channel? Okay, so the worst thing. Matt says when you think about it, the plot is mostly a giant reset button, at least for the new character. Thankfully, Torchwood and the others will know and document what happened, but for the hero of the day, they'll never know what they did, which kind of sucks. And, I'm not entirely agreeing with Matt on that.
Mm.
That
Mm.
was kind of the point. It's
Yeah.
not. I mean, I think of a plot reset button as a quickie solution for writing yourself into a corner.
Right.
Mm.
It's only a reset button, I think, if you think that him telling Torchwood to take him is what caused it, basically creating a Moffat loop.
It is. It,
Which I was
Mm.
going back and forth on, but they really implied that all of these like incidents were happening before that, so that really wasn't the cause of the paradox. At least I don't think that's what they intended.
no, they
Mm.
actually said that the cause of this was a rift fracture. What
Hmm.
that's interesting is they used a Moffat loop to stitch together the rift fracture. Um, because yeah, they knew what was going on, and they suddenly went back, and he's like, "Take me," so that they took him, so he would be there, and yeah, it's just there's a cause effect loop there. That there's
Mm.
where effect leads to cause,
Hmm.
which is a bootstrap paradox or a
Hmm.
Moffat loop, as we like to call them.
Yeah.
It is, but that's not since the rift bleeding over was itself the cause rather than Tommy having caused that in the first place.
Mm.
So at least that's how I interpret the way it was portrayed. So I don't think that was actually was that type of paradox for that
Mm.
reason.
Eh,
Yeah.
the,
Which
solu-
makes us
the solution was that kind of paradox, but no, it wasn't the cause.
right.
Mm.
Because that was the thing. They used that loop to stitch together the fractured part of the rift.
Hmm. Which I would
Mm.
say makes the writer of this episode. Who did we say wrote this episode? Uh, Helen Raynor, which I believe has written several other Torchwood episodes, a better writer of paradoxes than either Moffat or Nick Briggs, who we've had issues with both of their paradoxes.
Yeah, well, both of them tend to use that. Moffat tended to use bootstrap paradox so often that, like I
Mm.
said, we've nicknamed them Moffat loops.
Yeah.
And I don't
And
know.
Nick Briggs, it is a real reset button because his would have been, oh yeah, it literally never happened. Not even Jack and Tosh remember that Tommy was ever in the modern day, which is not what happened here either.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, and
I
she
mean,
wrote. Oh, funny enough, it does not have her listed as having written. Oh no, never mind. She edited. Never. I was looking at the edit. So she's written 2 episodes of Torchwood and 2 Doctor Who stories. So not actually all
mm.
that much. Although she was also a script editor for the RTD era.
She's
Uh,
not. She's not bad.
Mm.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, even Russell T occasionally used a reset button at the end of his plot lines, like
Yeah, like
series
I
3.
was, yeah, that's what I was gonna bring up. Like, if this
Mhm.
was more like that, where like a bunch of shit had actually affected it and closing the rift like undid all the damage, then that'd be one thing. But it was more so like closing the rift prevented the bad shit from happening, as opposed to completely undoing bad shit that had
Mhm.
already happened.
And I could kind of see the issues with Tommy losing his memory, but at the same time, if he kept his memory, that would have fucked up the timeline too, especially if he managed to
Mm,
avert his own death.
I
yeah.
like to think that one is Blinovich bitch slapping Tommy, but yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
All right. So, we are up to Thomas. What was the least favorite thing for you?
Um. God, I don't know. Kind of hard. I don't even necessarily that there's like nothing wrong with this. It's just I don't know if I can necessarily. I'm just gonna pass for now, and if someone else brings up something that I probably would have anyway, I'll just latch on to that.
All right, Bill.
So my first choice, I think, is actually the best thing I have for a scene. So I'm not going to pick that one yet. So I'm going to go with my second choice, and that is just that they introduce these Torchwood agents. They give them names. They appear like 3 or 4 times throughout the episode. And given the fact that this is the season that shows some of Jack's time traveling history, you would have thought that they would be more relevant to Torchwood as a whole, but this is literally their only appearance. We learn nothing about them. They don't really have any character in the story, and I wish that those
Hmm.
characters were a bit more meaningful. The two Torchwood agents we see,
Yeah, I mean, like we get flashbacks later in this series to him
and they're not
with
in them.
earlier incarnations. Yeah, and then not those actors aren't present, so it's like, well, that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, especially since we know Jack has been a Torchwood agent since I think the late 1800s,
Mm,
Yeah,
shortly after Torchwood would have been founded, actually.
yeah.
Gerald and Harriet, those were the ones.
So that leads me to my question: where was Jack in all of this?
Off doing other stuff elsewhere, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Was he? Do you remember in the Victorian era? Was he in Cardiff or was he somewhere else?
I don't recall, but I had have to rewatch the episode where he's recruited.
Right.
Mm,
It's been a long time since I've watched this season, so I just
But yeah,
remember
you
the.
you would kind. I mean, actually, he did say like he had experienced World War I, which makes sense, unless he
mm.
was. I don't know. I don't know if he actually would have been fighting the war.
At least one time. Remember, he's gone through the 20th century like 3-4 times by now.
Right. Like, well, yeah. He was a time traveler, and then he was sent back in time twice,
Mm-hmm.
at least
Yeah.
twice.
Mm.
He's probably also run some scams during World War I as well.
All right. So favorite scene, and what was Matt's? Ugh.
Matt says Tommy, despite wanting to stay and despite his shell shock, finally jumps in and saves the day and goes back to his own time, also recreating the opening moments from the beginning of the episode.
I actually did like how that worked. I have to agree with Matt. That was a good
Yeah.
scene. But let's
Mm.
see if we can come up with some others. Thomas.
Um, we've already talked about it to a point, so I'm not gonna harp on it too much. But I actually really liked the specific scene between Tosh and Jack, where he's revealing how like what Tommy's fate is,
Mm.
and what they are sending him back to and the fucked up, because like generally I like it when shows are willing to bring up their own country's fucked up history.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's like, hey, we weren't, our side wasn't completely perfect, we did fucked up shit too, so
Mm.
that's always nice to see an acknowledgement of that, especially with how hooray England and all this shit that and just generally the UK, that like Doctor Who can normally be. Like having Torchwood be like, yeah, here's some fucked up shit that happened in World War One. Is nice to see the acknowledged.
Yeah, God help you, this happened in America.
Mm.
No, we didn't do anything wrong because we were America. Fuck yeah. uh, all right. Bill.
So I think I'm going to go with I have some reservations about this because there's some interpretation involved, but I think I'm going to go with the scene where they're trying to decide what to do, and Tommy's like, well, if I were with other people who are going into combat with me, we would play cards or have a drink, but you guys aren't going with me, I'm going alone. And he's kind of stewing in that. And so Tosh comes through and she's like, well, we'll finish our date, well, you can come home with me. um and the reason I say some reservations is it depends on whether or not she still kind of sees him as a kid she has pity on, or whether she's respecting him as a soldier at that point, like respecting him as an equal, which I think she is at that moment. But there's
Hmm.
definitely interpretation for it. And if you interpret it the first way, then it's still not a great scene. But if you interpret that as, respect, and as just kind of like, okay, we do something that actually fits your desires, as your last time before going into this basically combat. I think it's a pretty good scene.
Hmm. Yeah, I basically take it as she knows, because she knows by then what they're sending him back to. It's like, might as well give him a positive experience before he goes.
Yeah, I agree. Also, the fact that she did have a huge crush on him,
Hmm.
Okay, right.
and
That's the thing. Whether it basically comes down to, is it a pity hump or is it not a pity hump?
I definitely don't
wait,
think it's
wait,
a
no,
pity.
no, 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 Bill, get your phrases right. Remember, this is a British show. Was it a pity shag? Oh,
uh,
I think part of it might have been, but not a pity for pity
hmm.
for the fact that he is about to go to his doom, essentially.
Yeah.
Although, and it actually, I mean, it's actually, now that I think about it, it's kind of fitting too, in the sense that she's the one out there in the trenches with him. She's the one who, she's not going through. She doesn't have as much to lose as him, but she's the one going through the same, it the same, if not more, emotional trauma in the moment than him. So she's probably also trying to get her own mind off of it the same way fellow soldiers would be.
Hmm.
You know,
Wolf and Forest says pity shag. So that's one vote on that side.
and Wolf and Forest would know. Wolf and Forest is from Kent. Anyway, I would actually like to take a pause at this point and point out the relationship between Tosh and Tommy at this point is very similar to the relationship we see in A Christmas Carol, not the Doctor Who episode, not the actual story, where we get to see Abigail once a year.
Right, she was frozen too.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and this episode,
Insert Christopher Lloyd clip here.
I was frozen today. Yeah. Anyway, And this was a good couple of years before that particular Doctor Who episode. I
Hmm.
believe that was Christmas 2010. And this was January 2008. So
Think
actually,
you're right because that's I think it's their honeymoon and he's definitely in the last Centurion outfit during that episode.
yes. So there's a good 3 years between those air dates. So, and that part of that particular story I didn't mind so much. There's other issues with the A Christmas Carol episode, which we talked about when we
Speaking
reviewed
of
it.
speaking of paradoxes that are not done as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's other issues with that. Please see our podcast when
And
we reviewed
and
that for any
and
details.
people and people playing God now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm. But in this one, this was done a lot better, and it did it 3 years earlier. But I just wanted to
Hmm.
note that parallel because it just literally occurred to me. It's like, where have I heard the
Mm.
story of thawing somebody out once a year and having a day of fun with them before putting them back in the cooler? Oh yeah! That's why I've got music from that episode going through my head. Thank you, subconscious. All right, so where were we on the call list here? Favorite scenes? I think we were at me, weren't we?
Yeah.
All right, so
Yes.
my favorite scene, I think, is the one where Owen first takes Tosh aside. Actually, since it's me and we're at the end, both scenes where Owen kind of takes Tosh aside. One right in the middle while they're setting up the rift detectors, and says, "You're getting awfully close to Tommy. I should warn you.
Hmm.
That moment
Uh,
is once again I'm speaking from experience, and then at the
Hmm.
end, just a matter of sympathy. It's I've been where you are. So
Yeah.
I think both cases were the best case though, and I just said my two favorite scenes were Owen scenes. What the fuck?
has
And I
hell
feel
frozen
like,
over?
yeah, I feel like what prevents the latter one from being annoying or shitty because it's Owen is the fact that it doesn't end up with the two fucking.
Yes,
If that had been the end result of that, then that would have been like, oh god, not this shit
Which
again.
and I think season one writers probably would have done that because she had a
Yeah.
crush on Owen throughout season one.
actually, I
Yeah.
do think they have sort of relationship later this season. Spoiler alert. But
Mm.
they're not auto building into that.
Yeah.
Owen's actually acting like a human being because yes, if this was first season Owen, it would have been, "Oh, I'm so sorry you've lost your loved one. Let's have sex."
Yeah.
Hmm.
You know what? You know what cure your blues? A good round of sex. Because
And this is, I mean,
Yeah.
and so this is growth for both of them. Owen, in that, he's actually becoming a human being who can support people with something other than his penis,
and Tosh
which is funny
actually being a character.
considering what he becomes later. Yeah, and Tosh actually, like, season one Tosh would not have been strong enough to like walk. Like I even put it in the title card. She's walking away from that scene, showing growth, showing some confidence. Like she takes what Owen said to heart. Season one Tosh, if anything, would have tried to kiss him at that moment, or she would have
Yeah.
just been like uncertain and shaky the whole time.
Yeah.
Um. All right. So let's move on to least favorite scenes. Care to read Matt's?
Sure. So Matt says Gwen easily getting scared by a one legged man that, for all we know, doesn't see or react to her being there.
Yeah. Yeah, that is utterly ridiculous. That is like, I could get being weirded out by it, but even then, she's seen weirder shit.
You know,
Like,
again, I'm going to pull us aside here. And I do love the fact that, every time they had one of these incidents, the light started flickering and everything. I mean, that was like one of those things that with ghost phenomenon you see. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I play a lot of Phasmophobia, so it's like, oh shit, it's hunting, kind of
Ah,
mentality. Um,
uh,
but
well, the
one of the
wiring's
things,
from before 1918. The building's not up to code.
Mhm. But one of the things I wish they would have done is for like the early appearance of these, temporal intrusions, if they would have added kind of a transparency and a haze effect to them. And I mean
mm,
that's simple like CGI 101. That's not a very advanced CGI technique.
mm,
So they should have been able to do that easily and cheaply. And they didn't, so that they
yeah,
looked like more like ghosts and they became more solid as they got
yeah,
deeper into the effect would have
Mhm.
actually made it a
yeah,
lot more.
yeah,
Especially since the time sealed uh, container hadn't even unsealed yet, so this was very early in the phenomenon. So that would have been a nice touch.
yeah.
Speaking of that, did anyone notice that when it opened and the thing when they hit the rift key both looked vaguely like regeneration energy?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
It was that same golden haze.
Mm.
That's the one effect that Modern Who
Same
has,
like
which,
yeah,
as I've
like
seen other people point out, that wasn't originally regeneration energy. That was the fact that Rose had like swallowed the time vortex and then the
mm,
doctor took it out of her and died. And then eventually it became regeneration energy and Doctor Who magic.
yeah. I know like the other thing that I'd compare it to because they're all, let's face it, basically the same effect as like the fog watch stuff. Um
I said,
like
oh,
in
Doctor Who
Utopia.
magic.
Yeah. Um but yeah, that thank God. That was like again, like if Gwen had just been weirded out, that's fine. But it's just the fact that they make her seem to be like really scared of it, and it's like a guy walking at her with a missing foot and crutches, and it's like you're telling me she's deathly afraid of a guy who all she'd have to do is kick out his one good leg, and there you go.
Well, I could see her
That
being freaked
that
out because he wasn't supposed to be there.
Right. I was gonna say that
mm,
said, if I was in a creepy hospital in a room by myself and then somebody appeared out of nowhere and I had had a conversation earlier that day about the fact that when ghosts start showing up here, that might mean like a massive time destruction phenomenon, I'd probably be a little freaked out too.
Mm-hmm.
like I
And
guess again, it's just a matter of to the degree she is a bit
yeah,
much.
and if they had had that semi-transparent and haze effect, that would have helped being freaked out because that would have had her look like she was looking at a ghost.
Mm,
But instead, he looks perfectly solid, like he's just out of place.
yeah.
And like I said, it would have just that would have just been a little bit of smart CGI and not very advanced stuff. Really makes me wonder why they didn't do that.
Mm. Might just be as simple as no one
No one,
thought of it until it was too late.
quite possible. By the way, so that was Matt's least favorite scene.
Yes.
hmm
So Thomas.
Um, I'm basically just gonna pass because the one thing I could think of Matt took, so
Uh,
that's why I was just kind of latching onto it.
okay, and Bill.
So I would say the ending sequence because it gets a bit repetitive. By which I mean Tosh basically has to talk Tommy through it 3 times. Like I mentioned twice in the summary, but I think there was at least one time that I skipped, possibly more, of her more or less having this variations of the same conversation with him, like one after the other, without much happening in between them. That's why I'm comfortable just referring to them as a scene. It's kind of a sequence of the same scene over and over with nothing in between,
Hmm.
really. Um, and it like they could have cut one or two of them out.
All right.
Yeah.
So my least favorite scene is after getting all dolled up for him, admitting she has a bit of a crush on him, And all of this, he kisses Tosh, and she freaks the fuck out. She's like, "But I'm older than you. I'm yada yada yada." She just
Well,
absolutely like just shuts down. And I'm
yeah,
like,
I think. Hmm.
what were you what were you hoping for, Tosh?
I think that's because the date was kind of like a game to her. Like it was like a day of fun, but it wasn't like meant to be like anything emotional or serious. And then once he kisses her,
Hmm.
she actually has to think about it, and there's emotions and ramifications that
Yeah.
she hadn't expected to think
So
about.
so
Hmm.
going out with Tommy was like having a safe boyfriend.
Kind of.
um, like
They
I.
only see one. They only see once a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of took it as like, as much as she probably had feelings for him by then, she's like, oh shit, I shouldn't really get attached. She was
Mm.
trying to give off the veneer that she had no interest, at least, to be like, not to hurt his feelings because she knows what's going to inevitably happen.
If she was
Um,
trying to give off a veneer, she wasn't interested. She was failing miserably.
oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it is Tosh.
Right.
It just suddenly, it's like I see where this is going, and then it just kind of the train derails on me. So I'm like,
Hmm.
what the fuck?
I get that, but I also like I think a lot of people that have similar personalities to Tosh, if they were with someone they had a crush on, but they didn't really expect it to go anywhere, all of a sudden got kissed, would not know how to react either.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to our final thoughts. Did Matt post final thoughts?
So
Yep.
Matt said, despite the nitpick of the reset button, it's a well-made and well-delivered dramatic episode with a few adult tones that make it place well in a show like Torchwood. The special effects are used well and sparingly, and the acting takes main stage as it should for a more character-driven story like this.
All right. And Thomas?
Yeah, this is definitely another instance of Torchwood at its best for me. Like, there are like some nitpicky things here and there, but it is all, and like there are probably some things that bring it down, but like ultimately it's like, if stuff like this and at least one or two of the other things we have covered more recently were just what Torchwood was all the time, and not any of the like stupid, edgy, grimdark shit that they're trying to like Owen's character outside of episodes like this. Um, you know, it'd be like Torch would be a lot better for it overall. If it was a lot more like this all the time. I mean, it'd be one of those shows that you shouldn't. I feel like you shouldn't binge watch Torchwood anyway because it's just, there's so much heavy stuff. But yeah, like I would definitely say this is one of the better episodes of Torchwood.
All right. Bill?
So I had completely forgotten this story existed, which is kind of disappointing because it is a pretty decent episode. And I think that's because it's completely filler. It's completely superfluous to everything else going on, which is kind of annoying because, as we said, there's an episode coming up that even, flashes back to Jack being recruited for Torchwood. It would have been nice if they had connected these sort of threads, but they didn't. Um,
Hmm.
that said, as a standalone episode, it's definitely pretty solid. It's good for Owen's character. It's good for Tasha's character. It has this one-off character who is served pretty well in here. He does a pretty has a pretty decent plot. And the other characters aren't really mentioned much, but they don't really need to be at this point. I think Yanto is the only character who hasn't really been served very much by the plot. And yeah, it's
And even he
pretty
has
solid.
a
There's a
kiss the
few
Jack
minor
moment
things.
in this.
Yeah, he does, which we haven't mentioned,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, pretty solid episode, and that's about it.
Yep, I have to agree. I had forgotten about this episode. It's kind of you forget about this. You get the first episode with John Hart, then you're just kind of like episode meat, which is the next episode. Is the
Mm.
next one that sticks out in your head, and the fact that this one doesn't is a shame because it is a very good episode. It's well written, it's thoughtful, it's well acted, it's well directed, and the only real flaw I have with it is they should have made the ghosts more ghostly to start with, and that's a nitpick. All in all, this is a beautiful episode. I'm actually sad I'd forgotten about it before.
Mm.
So, let's rate this. Matt IC gives it a 4.5, and I will pop up the spreadsheet here. And to the last man, Matt gives it a 4.5. Thomas, you are next.
Uh, ooh. You know what? I prefer this to Out of Time, which I gave a 4.5. And I don't think there's enough dragging this down, so I'm actually going to give this a 5.
I was going to say, is it better than last week's Sleeper? You also gave that a 4.5.
Um, yeah, I'd say it's better than that.
All right, Bill.
Ooh, I hadn't even considered the 5 as an option. I'm gonna say we complained about enough to keep it from being a 5, but 4.5 seems fair.
I actually agree with Thomas. I'm going to give this a 5.
Hmm.
I believe there are some
Ooh.
thoughts, but I don't believe it's enough to track it down a good 0.25. So it would be like a 4.8, and that's a 5 on our books.
So this just shot up really high.
Yes, it did. With 2 of us giving 4.5s, 2 of us giving 5.0s, that averages out to a 4.75, which would put this
Is it on par with anything?
would put it at number 29 out of 407 things reviewed.
Wolf and Forest says this was a 4.9, which on our scale would be a 5.0.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
The only spin-off it's
on par
with is
Mark of the Berserker, Sarah Jane Adventures.
yeah.
It is
Wow, it's a
better than Countryside, which, as you know, is one of my favorite Torchwoods of all time. And it is not quite as good as Torchwood Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which comes in at a 4.9.
Mm-hmm. And that was the
John Hart.
James Marsters episode. Yep.
So there you go, 29 out of 407 things reviewed. That's all we have to say about Torchwood to the Last Man.
All right. So if you're watching us on YouTube, please let us know in the comments what do you think about To the Last Man. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to get our exports every Monday, or follow us on Twitch to see our streams every Tuesday night, especially as we are starting to get into the Series 13 not too long from now.
All right, so next week, that will be it for our reviews for this season. Next week, we'll do a little prep work for Series 13. It's been 2 years and 1 pandemic since Doctor Who Series 12, the recap special. See you for that next week.
See you then.